Hello, I'm Lucy MacGregor. I'm going to give a short overview of our work exploring the cortical networks that support ambiguous word meaning access. Meaning access is challenged when words are semantically ambiguous, but facilitated by a comprehension system which uses multiple sources of information and adapts accordingly. We investigated whether the use of immediate context and recent experience are dependent on the language-selective network or the domain general multiple demand network. We analysed behavioural data from 18 volunteers with chronic lesions, whom we assigned to one of three groups based on the overlap between their lesion and each network. Volunteers listened to 20 coherent sentences containing 2 ambiguous words disambiguated to less frequent meanings, 20 match sentences without ambiguities, and 40 anomalous sentences. For each sentence, they judged whether it made sense. Results showed that all volunteers could discriminate the coherent from the anomalous sentences and, as can be seen in the plot on the right, made very few errors. The plot on the left shows that response times were longer when sentences contained ambiguous words, but they were unrelated to lesion location or extent. This brings us to our first conclusion. Volunteers were all able to use context to successfully access the appropriate lower frequency word meanings during sentence comprehension, and thus we could not draw conclusions about the differential roles of the two networks. After a delay of around 30 minutes, participants listened to 80 words presented in isolation. 40 of the ambiguous words were primed, they'd appeared earlier in sentence context, and 40 of the ambiguous words were unprimed. For each word, participants gave a word associate. The plot here on the left shows that across all participants and items, primed words prompted a higher proportion of sentence context related responses of around 5%. This brings us to our second conclusion. Preference for the lower frequency meaning was increased following recent experience, replicating what has been termed the word meaning priming effect. If we look at the plot on the right, we see that there was no statistical difference in the size of the word meaning priming effect across our three groups. However, there was quite a bit of variability across individuals, which we explored in correlational analyses. As an estimate of individual participant word meaning priming effects, we used the residuals from the mixed effects model of the data. On the plot shown here, a positive or negative residual indicates whether a participant showed more or less word meaning priming than predicted by the model. Across individuals, reduced word meaning priming was associated with larger lesions in the language network, which is shown in the plot on the right, but not in the MD network or across the whole brain, and was not associated with response times in the sentence coherence judgment task. This brings us to our final conclusion and the key finding. Adaptation in response to recent experience as measured by word meaning priming was dependent on the language selective network, not the MD network, and was not driven by poor comprehension. Thank you for your interest. If you have questions or would like to discuss any details, I'd be very happy to hear from you.